Now, on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app. O'Connor and Company.
It's our big fourth hour here, the 8 o'clock hour. If you missed any of the show up until now, you should subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss out. You want to be a part of everything we do here on O'Connor and Company. It gets you going and gets you informed and hopefully entertained. If you don't feel entertained, that's really Julie Gunlock's fault. Julie, good morning.
Good morning.
Kidding, of course. I'm Larry O'Connor, and coming up, we're going to talk to the Attorney General of Virginia, Jason Miyares. But, Julie, look who we've got. One of our pals.
I know.
He's a goodie, and he's going to be a man in demand right now as all eyes turn to China. Of course, his eyes are always focused on China because he knows what an adversary they are on the world stage. He, of course, is Gordon Chang. Mr. Chang, it's always good to talk to you, sir. Thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you, Mr. O'Connor, and thank you, Ms. Gunlock.
His book, of course, Plan Red, China's Project to Destroy America, and this is a project that's been in the making for quite some time. So I must ask you, as we learned that a Chinese delegation will meet with a U.S. delegation in Europe later this weekend, will these tariffs that have been announced, that President Trump seems sort of locked in on, especially when it goes to China, will these thwart China's plans that you lay out in your book, the Plan Red, Plan to Destroy America?
Well, that depends on the actions of one man, whose name is Donald John Trump. If the tariffs stay in place, they will damage, of course, the American economy. They will cause some pain, but they will bring down the Chinese economy because we're seeing signs of severe stress in China. Question is whether Trump will hold strong or not, and that we're going to find out, Larry and Julie.
So what are you looking for as this plays out here in terms of indications from the Trump administration that they mean business? Because a lot of people are saying, oh, this is just saber rattling, this is just flexing, and Trump wants to make a deal and the tariffs aren't going to stick. And I guess what I'm asking is, what is China most afraid of?
I think China is most afraid of Trump not giving in. China has really no cards to play except putting pressure on Trump to give in because it's the smaller economy, it's the trade surplus economy. Their economy already was failing before the Trump tariffs, and Trump's tariffs have done a couple of things. First of all, they have put a lot of people out of work in China, and also I think what they have done is they have gotten the Chinese regime worried that the U.S. is no longer supporting communism in China, because we've had previous American presidents, Nixon, George H.W. Bush, and Clinton, who came to the rescue of Chinese communism in the past, and they're expecting Trump to do the same thing now. Trump might do that or might not. We just don't know. And a lot of it is going to depend on how tough the Chinese are at the bargaining table, because they've indicated that they're going to hang tough, which means Trump will hang tough. But if sides start to de-escalate, as the word that Treasury Secretary has used, well, then maybe China will get off the hook.
It's been very interesting watching what's going on in China, Gordon. There's been some worker riots, which, as you know, it's not easy to get information out of China, but there are videos of these worker riots and the disabling sort of, I would say it seems destabilized over there. Is this something that is happening more widespread throughout China? Again, we've seen a few examples, but how widespread is it?
I think it's fairly widespread. Before Trump's tariffs, factories were closing or factories were going to very few shifts. And that was just generally because of a number of structural issues in the Chinese economy. When Trump's tariffs went on, it meant that a lot of factories that had been hanging on for quite some time decided to throw in the towel. And that meant workers were then forced back to their hometowns, back to farms. But many of them decided to protest because they didn't get their back wages, and they felt that they were being treated unfairly by the factory owners. So there are these protests. The Communist Party has them under control for the moment, but if they spread and they become too big and workers start to give encouragement to each other, then there's nothing the regime can do.
Who needs each other more. We have this weird symbiotic thing where our industries and our factories who have been able to get a lot of cheap stuff, and I saw Vice President Pence say the other day in a public remarks that part of the American dream is buying cheap stuff. And I don't know if that actually is necessarily the American dream, but we have been able to benefit from getting cheap stuff, and we've been able to buy stuff for cheap, and companies have been able to make a lot of money because of that cheap stuff. China also holds a lot of our debt, Gordon. That's part of that symbiotic relationship, and they need to keep their people employed, and so they need these factories. So I guess when you see the reliance on each other, who's in more desperate state here? Who is more reliant on the other as these negotiations move forward?
Clearly, China's more reliant on the U.S. Last year, their merchandise trade surplus against us was $295.4 billion. That was up 5.8% from 2023. Their economy would just fail without the United States. We would have problems. Prices would go up temporarily, but we can buy our stuff from elsewhere, and we're doing that right now. So, for instance, the company with the supply chain that is hardest to move, which is Apple, has moved its supply chain for American production out of China. As Tim Cook said, products for the United States are going to be made in India and Vietnam. So if Apple can move, everybody can move. But we've got to remember what the stakes are here. China is not just another trading partner. It is, for instance, fully behind the fentanyl gangs. That's 70,000 Americans die each year. So we're talking about a regime that is deliberately killing Americans. So this is not just a trade issue. This is an issue about the survival of the United States because China does intend to destroy us. They say that all the time. We Americans, we don't think we have to listen to what our enemies say. But we should start putting an ear to what the Chinese regime actually talks about when they start to mention us.
Gordon, that what you just said is so important about, China being behind the fentanyl issue and many other issues that are really destroying our country. How can people message that? What is the best way to say, look, this is, we want to strengthen the supply chains in America because we do not want to be reliant on these people who hate us, or I shouldn't say people, I should say the government, the communist government of China that hates us and wants to destroy America. I mean, Bessent is about to go meet with them, and perhaps there will be this great trade deal, but we don't want to return to where we were before of getting cheap goods for China, and really propping up this government that hates us. How do we message to Americans that it really is actually important to buy Americans, to buy quality products from America rather than relying on cheaper products from China?
Lydia, my wife and I, we drove through the South a couple of years ago, and we saw devastated towns. These are towns where factories have left for China, where there is no hope, where there is fentanyl, and young people are dying. And we as Americans have an obligation to other Americans, our fellow Americans, to make sure that they have the chance of the future. This is just so fundamental to me. Yes, Wall Street can do well. Yes, there are other segments of the American economy that can do well, but we have a moral obligation to our fellow Americans. China is stealing about $500 billion worth of U.S. intellectual property each year. That's our future. China is doing all of these things to undermine and to attack our democracy, and we have got to understand it. We did not pay attention to Osama bin Laden. We have to pay attention to the Chinese.
Great point, and I wanted to end here with this. We only have about a minute left, but this entire conversation about China seems to be shot through economic terms and tariffs and trade and manufacturing and imports. What about the military aspect? They have been relentless in building up their military, and the obvious target of that military buildup is us, and we don't seem to talk about it very much, sir.
Yeah, we are building the Chinese military, which is configured to kill Americans. It's as simple as that. That is strategically wrong. That's morally wrong.
Well said. We'll leave it at that. That's all we need. Gordon Chang, thank you. I know you're going to be a man in demand. We might be calling on you again as these discussions continue over the course of the next several days. So I hope you keep your phone ready. Keep your phone by your side.
Of course, and thank you so much, Julie.
Let's be clear. Keep Lydia by your side because she.
Yes,
she
that's right.
Use the phone.
That's right.